What's up, people on the interwebs? Hope you have an amazing day. So today I thought I'd talk about some things I don't like in the Japanese education system, or things I don't really agree with. So let's get right into it. So the biggest one, if you don't know how Japanese schooling works, is in April. That is their new school year. So they go from April to March, and then they go to the next year. That's when it's kind of the start of the cherry blossom. So if you ever watch anime, that's why the kids are always really excited for the new school year, because it links with cherry blossom season. But one thing I really dislike with the school system, it's also not just the school system. A lot of other companies in Japan are like this as well. But when it comes to April, or kind of 2 weeks before, like in mid-March, teachers get moved around. They move schools. It's when they're applying for being a teacher in Japan, it's not, oh, I'm qualified as a teacher, I live here, therefore I'm going to apply for a job at like my local school. It doesn't work like that. If you get qualified as a teacher in Japan, you are then qualified to technically work at any school in the prefecture you live in. So if you live, let's say this is an island here, this island here, let's say you live in the middle of the island, like this is your home, general home, this is where you live your whole life. You become a teacher, you're hoping to kind of move back home and teach in your home. When you get qualified as a teacher, there is a high chance you want to live here. They're going to stick you at the top of the island or at the bottom of the island. So you think, okay, cool, my first year I get stuck at the top. That means I'm going to be here for a couple of years. Nope, there's a chance the next year coming, you then get moved to the bottom of the island. You know, every year there is a potential chance that you qualify as a teacher, you could be moved to a different school every year. And I think it's such a really tough working environment, because I think bonding with the kids is always hard. Like, you do get emotionally attached to the kids because they're like puppies. Their little cute eyes just catch your heart. So you bond with the kids and you think, cool, I'm going to have them for 3 years. I'm going to see them grow from the first years all the way to the third years if you're a junior high school teacher, or for the elementary if you're a if you from the first year to the 6th year for elementary. Same thing for high school, from the first to the third year. You think you're going to be there, you're going to see them kind of grow from young little babies to like an adult. But no, there's a high chance that you could get moved every year. And I think it's just tough, because you want to try and get used to like the school, how it works, build a teaching curriculum. You might have to change your style up for how the kids you've got, are they kind of really high academically, or are they very low? You know, it could change every year. But you know, at least if you stay in a school, you can build on like how the current kids are, what works best, what doesn't work. But no, there's a chance you could be bouncing around every year. And I just think it's really tough. Like, luckily, it's very unlucky to get moved every year. It's not impossible. I've actually seen teachers move to a different school every year since I have been here. But hopefully, if you do get kind of placed in a school, you're going to stay there for at least kind of 2 or 3 years, hopefully. But no, there is a chance. And there's one side of me that the only time I'm kind of like, okay, it can work with moving the teachers around, is if you have a really bad teacher and you can see how they teach the kids, it doesn't work for them and you're actually making it harder for them to learn the topics. So that's the only element I like with the moving around, is that, okay, if you've got a bad teacher in your school, there is a chance you can actually remove that teacher and then get a better teacher in. But then it's also, you have the other side of this coin. You could have a really good and great teacher, and then they get moved, and then a bad teacher gets put in, and then the kids tank. And I've actually seen this happen before. One of the schools I was working in, the kids were super energetic, super fun. They loved learning English. But when April came, that teacher moved, a new teacher came in, and their teaching style was just not the best way for these kids to learn. And you can see their energy for learning English completely tanked. That class was so hard to teach. It was always a really hard class because the kids were just unmotivated just because of the new teacher's teaching style. So I'm a really big believer, depending on the teacher a student gets, it's such a make or break to how well they will do in the topic, the subject, how much they like the subject overall. I'm such a believer it's 90% of the teacher's energy and 10% of the student. You know, I've always been like this, and seeing it as a teacher, it just reconfirms it even more. The teacher a student gets is so important. And I also just think it's sometimes really heartbreaking for the teachers, because, you know, they get a school they really like, they want to stay, but then they get moved, and the next school could be like a horrible toxic environment, they might not be enjoying it, and they miss the old school. Also, this works both ways. You could have a teacher in a really awful toxic teaching environment, and then they get moved to a nicer school. You know, there's two sides of this coin, but I just think it's so hard, because you could get, you know, you could live like in the middle or the top of the island, and then you get put so far from your home and you don't even want to live there. And I especially think for the younger teachers coming in, I think this is really hard for them, especially if they're not married or have a partner and they're trying to find someone, because there's a chance you could be, you know, fresh, brand new teacher, you're hoping to get placed into the city, and then maybe you can do some sort of dating on the side, but then you get like your placement, and then you're right in the countryside. It's only old people and families, so you've got no chance of dating either and finding someone. And especially with the current climate of Japan, it's like, you know, you really want the young people to try and find one another, and it's just an extra element to make that finding someone potentially even harder. So it's just you know, this is how Japan's always been for their teaching. Same thing with other companies. This is, you know, this is the same thing where you could be working in a big company, you could be going into like admin for the first year, and then you get next year you're then going into like web development. You know, it completely changes. You know, they see for like companies that you should kind of be able, like, a jack of all trades, which on paper doesn't seem like a bad idea, to be like, yeah, I'm going to become so like multi-skilled in so many jobs, it's really useful. But also at the same time, no one's in a job long enough to kind of get used to the role. How does it work? What do I do next? Like, how you kind of always hear about that middle management where no one from above wants to kind of agree on something, and then you have to wait for everyone to agree for change to eventually come. It kind of doesn't really surprise me, because if everyone gets reshuffled around and you haven't got a stable like top person or someone who hasn't been there for a while, they might think, oh, this is a good idea, and then take it to their boss. And if their boss has also been there for 2 months, they might be like, oh, but I've only just got here, I don't really want to like shake the waters up. So it's a really interesting like way how they do kind of just the working environment, the movement around places and people. Like, it's just interesting. That's all I can say about it. You know, some things I think it's not a bad idea, but I just overall I just don't like the idea, because I just think back in the UK, you know, you tend to go work in a school of like, okay, I live here, these are my options, and you go from there. Same thing, I'm not too sure how it works with the private schools if you want to go to a private one, because, you know, back in the UK, teachers kind of want to get into private school sometime, just if they're looking for more money, then doing it for like the greater community, that kind of like logic, whatever their mindset wants to be, for either making lots of money or kind of wanting to help their local community. You know, everyone's different on their mindset of what they want to do. You know, most teachers are in it for helping the next generation and wanting to help people learn, but man, it's the whole moving teachers around, it's really hard. Like, it's such an interesting way how to do education, I think. But let me know in the comments down below, do you think this is a good idea? Do you not think it's a good idea? Do you think it's better to have maybe how your country does teaching? What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Bye.